Wonderful. So as always, we are grateful for the opportunity to serve all of our customers at CapEx. Our mission here is to be adding value in every possible way. And one of the ways that we wanted to add value is by presenting this capital project mastery program. So we have gone through every aspect of capital projects, from establishing, what is a capital project. We talked about the executive summary. We talked about selecting the team and getting clear on what the vision for the team is. We talked about the creating of an RFQ. We talked about supplier selection. We talked about the blocking and tackling of when you are in the project. How does that look? What's the communication strategy? And now we are what I call running through the tape. So it's finalizing the runoff, the equipment. So you've started with it, you have built it, you've created it, you've managed the whole process, and now this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you verify that the equipment is going to perform to the expectations, to what the RFQ said it would, and what the supplier promised in their quotation. So that is that's what we're working on here today. That's what we're talking about. So just again, this a little bit of advertisement about who in the heck CapEx is. We are located in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. We represent the following companies: ATC Automation, an awesome company out of Cookeville, Tennessee. 85% of their business is with repeat customers. Why does that matter? There are a lot of one and done, a lot of dead soldiers out there as far as the equipment business goes. And so that, not that every project that ATC's done has been amazing, but they follow through, they always run through the tape, and that keeps our customers coming back. So that's why we enjoy the fact that 85% of the business that we do year over year is with repeat customers. And that says a lot in our industry. So that's why I always highlight that. Cincinnati Test Systems is the largest leak test company in the world. As I mentioned, I started working with them back in the early 90s when I was actually a customer. I worked at Cummins Engine Company. I was a manufacturing engineer at Cummins, and we started purchasing Cincinnati Test Systems equipment. They were a supplier of mine. So that's kind of how I got into this whole capital equipment world. Duquesne Plastic Joining, they are a global and diverse plastic joining company. Hot plate welding, ultrasonic welding, vibration welding, laser welding, anything that's welding plastics together, plastic joining is their life, is what they do. They are a global, they have locations around the world, and just a wonderful company to work with as well, very customer focused. Symetric is a division of Cincinnati Test Systems. We kind of break them out because they're focused on high speed in-process test and data management, which is a bit unique. They are Industry 4.0 all over again. Then Keller Technologies right here in Fort Mill, South Carolina. They have a comprehensive line of industrial air filtration, wet and dry air filtration. All right, so again, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about the runoff process. We're going to talk about the preparation that needs to be applied before actually doing the runoff, and then what happens during the runoff, and then what's the plan for after the runoff. This running through the tape is the most important aspect, other than selecting the right supplier. Running through the tape means that you're doing everything to ensure, everything possible to ensure success in the implementation of this project. What's really important to know and to keep in mind as it relates to a runoff is that this is your opportunity to ensure that the equipment is operating to specification prior to shipment. What I see many companies do is they will sacrifice the desire to get it delivered. They tell their management, hey, we're going to have it on August 1st. And when they go to the runoff, they're doing the runoff, and it isn't performing as well as expected. Maybe it's not the equipment, maybe the parts aren't to specification, and that's causing challenges with the equipment. For whatever reason, they're not able to demonstrate the expected performance of the equipment, and they compromise. They give in, they acquiesce. They say, you know what, I told management it was going to be by August 1st. You got to come in and fix this. Make sure I'm trusting that you're going to come in and fix it. That is the wrong strategy 90+% of the time. Don't just try to push something through to meet a timeline, because that will bite you in the butt long after the equipment has been delivered. It's important that you not compromise on the expected quality of the equipment, because here's what happens is you're working with these guys, you're building a great relationship, and they're good people. And so when things don't go quite right, you always you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. It's difficult when you have relationships with people to hold their feet to the fire as it relates to expectations. But that's why you went through all of the preparation, all the work leading up to this point. If it's not performing as it is expected and as you would sign off on, then don't allow it to be shipped. The equipment is going to get fixed more readily and more permanently if it's fixed when it's at the supplier. So don't compromise. That's what I see most often with customers, and they have problems long term because the supplier sucked, or as far as delivery, or they didn't do a good job programming, or the tooling was bad, or any number of issues, but they let it come in to their facility, and so they live with a piece of equipment that is subpar for the remainder of that equipment's life. So don't do that. Don't compromise. That's my point. So okay, as far as supplier runoff preparation, you got to prepare for the runoff. So important. The most critical aspect of a successful runoff is preparing for a successful runoff. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. When is the runoff going to happen? Get a firm date. Get that firm date as far in advance as possible so that you can ensure that you've got a plan for success. You can tell your operations team, this is when I'm going to need you there. You can make sure to coordinate all of the appropriate components to be available, all of the Lineside tools that you're going to need during the runoff to ensure success. So the longer you have to do that, and we're going to talk about all those things coming up here, but the more time you have, the more likelihood of success for the runoff. Again, as it relates to preparation, I just mentioned parts or materials. So depending on the type of equipment that you're going to do, what quantities of materials and parts are you going to have, or do you need to ensure a successful runoff? When is it going to get there? And how is the quality of that equipment or material being verified? Can't tell you how many times I've gone to a runoff and the parts come in. Of course, they come in the day before the runoff and they're out of specification. Well, that just puts us all in a pickle, because you've got this equipment that's ready to run off. You've made commitments to your management. You've got your operations people there to perform the runoff, and the components that came in were not to specification. So we want to verify all of that ahead of time to ensure that you are ready and you're not wasting anybody's time. Because that's what most often happens is everyone shows up, everyone's there, we're there for a runoff, we've planned for it, but we didn't do enough verification up front, and we end up wasting people's time. Of course, hours, labor, that's the most expensive thing that we have. And if we've got a bunch of operations people sitting around, then we're just adding to the cost of this equipment. So we really don't have an opportunity to recapture that cost, because those operators that would normally be producing product at the facility, they're at the supplier's facility not doing anything but sitting on their hands. So, and they get bored and they don't like it either. So it's important for everyone that we are well prepared and that we have verified the quality of the stuff that we're going to be putting together. Resource planning. So that's the who, who in your team: quality engineer, safety engineer, who from maintenance, who from every aspect of the ensuring the quality of equipment and quality of product that's produced. Who's going to be going on this runoff with you? And then you want to coordinate travel schedules. The facility, you've been there, where it is, where they should stay, logistically how to get there. So it's important that you, as the leader of this project, help the team prepare so that this isn't something that they have to worry about. Especially, a lot of operators, they don't travel a whole lot. So if you can help make it as easy for them as possible, then they're going to be more efficient, more effective in ensuring that their part of the project is successful as far as them running the station. So typically you got two groups that's going to come. So the engineering, maintenance, and safety team is going to come ahead of time, and then the operations team is going to come afterwards, because again, you want that couple of day of buffer before you get all those operations folks there, just to make sure that everything is absolutely ready for their arrival so that this runoff can get taken care of and completed in a timely manner. So keeping on with this runoff strategy, you want to make sure that you got the pre-runoff line preparation. So that's what I mentioned, arrive early. You got to make sure that everything is ready and set up for a successful runoff before your operations people arrive. What is the training plan that you have? How are the maintenance people going to get trained? So generally a good strategy is to align the maintenance people with the suppliers people and have them walk through each station and talk about different areas where they need to be greased or oiled, or filters need to be changed and settings need to be confirmed. So having that time with the operator or with the maintenance folks to verify, and then so that they could begin to create their list of PMs and checklists and everything that they need to be working on to ensure that their time at the supplier is fully utilized. And then from an operator perspective, what is the plan for training the operators at each individual station? It's important that you set aside time for that, because you can't just show up and expect them to run the equipment without having appropriate training. And again, there aren't going to be any standard work processes for them to study ahead of time. So because this is brand new equipment and that hasn't necessarily been created as of yet. So what is the quality plan? Are you going to do gauge R&R? So my recommendation is that you do gauge R&Rs well in advance of doing the runoff, meaning that if you have a leak tester, as an example, that you will verify that that leak tester, that leak test station is performing to the expected gauge R&R, 20%, 10%, whatever your expectation is for a gauge R&R. Verify the quality. If you have torque guns, verify that they are meeting the specifications. If you have press stations, verify that they are meeting the specifications. If you have these assemblies and you've got functional equipment at the end of the assembly line, as an example, verify that the functional test equipment is performing to the specifications prior to the runoff. So you want to make sure that all these functions within the operations are performing to the specification before the runoff. Because if you're trying to measure all this and gauge all this during the runoff, it just creates chaos and it makes your runoff much less efficient and it wastes people's time, right? And that's what we definitely don't want to do. We've got operations people there. That costs money. Let's not waste their time. And then the runoff quality plan. So what is the runoff quality plan? How are we going to test? How are we going to measure the quality of the components or the materials that are coming off the end of the capital equipment that you've purchased? Then the daily communication. So it's important that you have a strategy for communicating every day. So in the morning, you have a kickoff meeting prior to everyone going to their stations and running the equipment. And then in the afternoon, you are going to have an afternoon wrap up. Here's what we learned. Here's what we need to work on. Here's what we're going to fix overnight. So having those conversations on a regular basis every single day during the runoff is going to make certain, you'll be certain that everyone's on the same page. And that is critical. Communication, as we've talked about throughout these discussions about capital project management, communication is the #1 responsibility that the manufacturing engineer has, because that's going to ensure that the overlying results of managing risk and managing the timeline have been attacked. So it's communication that keeps all that flowing so that there aren't any surprises. Okay, so daily communication plan, we'll talk about that. So operator training, how are you going to train the operators? What is that plan? Product staging. So a lot of times when we have a runoff, specifically for assembly equipment, the products come in crates. So if you got these castings that are in crates, what are you going to do? You're going to have the operator walk over to the crate, pick it up, walk back over to the station, set it on the station. Well, that's going to be inefficient. So we need to stage these parts so that we get a better idea of what the cycle time is going to be, of where the product actually needs to be staged when it goes into the facility. So that's going to help us get some insight as to how the equipment's going to flow long term. So staging the product ahead of time is important to be thinking about that, conceptualizing it, and then putting that into action. What are the lunch plans for each day? So if you're going to be there for a week, what I suggest is the week before, you say, we're going to have this on this day, this on this day, this, pizza, pasta, whatever. You get that laid out ahead of time. So it's not a game day decision. It's something that you don't even have to worry about because you have planned it. It is done. It's just one thing that is off your plate as far as responsibilities. No pun intended with lunch, or maybe pun intended, yeah. Okay, supplier runoff checklist. Now, I'm going to go through a series of checklists. So it's important that these checklists are created well in advance. So last week we talked about blocking and tackling, and that's effectively when you're in the blocking and tackling phase of a project. That could be, depending on the size of the project, maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2 months, maybe it's 3 months. When you're in that phase of the project, that's when you want to create these checklists. And these checklists, you do not want to create them in a vacuum. You want to create them or have the appropriate person create them and review them together so that everyone's on the same page and everyone agrees, yeah, these are the critical aspects of these particular areas of concern for the equipment that we all reviewed it, we all agree, these things have to happen, they have to be checked off before we will even consider shipping the equipment to our facility. So let's go through some of these. All right, the pre-runoff checklist. What do you need to have in place prior to running off the equipment? So that would be, you've got to have components. You've got to have something to tear the equipment down. You've got to have a tear down station. So the tools to tear things down. You've got to have the gauges necessary to verify that the products that you're producing are correct. So those might be some items that are on that pre-runoff checklist that you're going to create. Again, you create these during the blocking and tackling phase of the project so that you've got them ready when necessary. So safety checklist, you want to have your safety person go through their safety checklist. What needs to be checked on this equipment? They're going to have an all-encompassing checklist, but what are the specifics for this equipment that need to be addressed to ensure that the proper safety is adequate at your facility? And then the maintenance checklist. So from a maintenance perspective, what do your maintenance people need to know and understand about this equipment ahead of time? It's really important that maintenance go through, verify wiring, labeling, controls, issues, and communication. So everything associated with the verifying that the equipment has been put together to the specifications put forth by the maintenance team. Quality checklist. So your quality person, what are the critical characteristics that this equipment needs to be producing in the parts? So we want to have that quality checklist. You're going to verify that it's, again, producing quality parts to the specifications and expectations. IT checklist. What does your IT department need to ensure that everything has been completed prior to shipping the equipment? And then, so the next thing is Lineside Tools. So what Lineside tools are required? So what I mean by Lineside tools, disassembly stations. So a lot of times what happens is you have a limited number of castings. And so we'll assemble the parts, and then as soon as they get assembled, there'll be an operator that is disassembling the parts. So they're taking it all apart and preparing it to be run through the line again. So if you don't plan ahead of time, then you are going to be scrambling to find the tools and fixtures and different components necessary to properly disassemble these components. So it's important that you, again, think about that ahead of time. It's going to be line side. You're going to want easels with paper at each station so that the operators can write down any challenge that they're having, any ideas that they have, any quality concerns, any faults that they experience. All that needs to be recorded so that you've got your, again, this is about making sure that this equipment is performing to the best that it can prior to shipment, or flat out meets the specification. So if it can get better, what can we do to make it better? We want to write that down. Water and snacks, we want our operators, we want everyone to be comfortable. So just make sure they're properly hydrated, make sure they're not hungry. So have these things available to them. What gauges are going to be necessary to verify as we are assembling the equipment along So assuming that it's assembly equipment, maybe it's machining equipment, what gauges are we going to have available to verify that the equipment is producing to the specifications? In some cases, we've had customers that bring in a mobile CMM because they want to verify that the parts received from the casting supplier are to specifications, because if the components aren't to specifications, you're going to be hosed, because the equipment's not going to assemble something that's out of specifications. We build it to be and serve a specific specification. So speaking of server, so we want to simulate that data collection. So do we need a server? Lineside, how are we going to simulate? It's important that you have that available and is hooked up and utilized if necessary. So those are all of the Lineside pieces of equipment. So the supplier runoff strategy continued. So we're going to ask a series of questions here. You want to answer these questions ahead of time, not the day of, not when you're in the heat of the moment. So will you correct equipment issues as they arise? Why is that important? Well, if you don't decide ahead of time and station 30 has a problem, are you going to stop and correct it? If you're not, what is the attempt, or what is the plan for addressing that issue long term? So maybe station 30's problem, you're still able to produce parts, but you're going to have to come back and fix that. Well, that's something that you may consider continually running, so that you can get a real feel for the equipment's cycle time, the equipment readiness. But if it is something that when it has that fault or that issue, it occurs every single part, then you have to stop and correct it. So just having a general strategy for correcting issues at each of the stations ahead of time is really important, because they will help you be more efficient and effective when those problems arise. So if you do say, yes, I want to work on this equipment, or we got to correct this issue, how will you factor this into the cycle time? So just understanding that ahead of time and thinking through how will I calculate these downtime, this downtime into my overall cycle time? Am I going to throw that particular one out? So I took the equipment down for 15 minutes on that particular assembly. How are you going to think that through and calculate that? Just again, it's about planning, preparation, and having an idea of what you're going to address ahead of time. How will you validate the data? So you're producing the data. What are you going to do? Are you going to have gauges? You're going to have CMM? You're going to have functional test equipment? Are you going to send it off somewhere else to validate what the data that you're seeing the equipment produce is consistent with the actual data for it? So you want to verify data. You don't just assume that the data that the equipment is producing is correct. You want to verify the data. So it's really important that you think through that and understand that ahead of time. How will the server be validated? So, what is the plan for utilizing either a local server, remote server? How and when will you validate that the data management is correct through the server? How will the potential failure mode be checked for each station? So this is one of the most common challenges with all equipment, is how do you, when a station stops running, is there something that says, here's the problem on the HMI? Well, you want every fault ideally to be identified. You want clear instructions for when you experience this fault, this is why it occurred, and this is how to correct it. So you need to go through, how are you going to verify that ahead of time? Again, that's typically a maintenance function. It's something that you want your maintenance people to do. And you want to make sure that before that equipment leaves that facility, that those notes are in there, that the failure for each of these aspects, specifically from a controls perspective, has been clearly identified. So will you have a wrap-up meeting each day, like I mentioned? So I recommend that you do that every single day. You take time. Here's where we are. Here's where we've been. Here's where we're going, so that everyone is on the same page. Will you perform a changeover if applicable? You want to know that ahead of time. So if this equipment's going to assemble more than one part, are you going to plan to change the equipment over to confirm that it operates properly when it is changed over? I recommend that you do, given the opportunity. I know that's more components, that's more effort, that's a longer runoff, but you want to verify that it works before you ship it. Again, this is all about preventing the equipment from getting your facility in less than optimal condition. That's what you want to avoid. So will you video each station? You want to, again, plan ahead of time. Video each station. This is going to help you with standard work. When the equipment actually gets to your facility, you're going to have to create all the standard work, everything that goes along with it, at least to meet ISO and the TS requirements, and just smart business is you have standard work. So video those stations so that you can be working on it when the equipment is being packaged up, all the the open issues list is being checked off, so on and so forth. So then also, what is plan B? So if the station 30 crashes and we're not able to produce product anymore, what is the plan? So if you have thought through ahead of time, you'll know, oh my gosh, there's no way that we're going to be able to fix this efficiently in the next 2 days. We're going to have to send all of our operators home. So you have a plan ahead of time, so you're not hemming and hawing, oh, I don't know what to do. I don't, just have a plan, execute it. Okay, doesn't look like we're going to have this ready. We're going to have to back up, regroup, and do this all over again because of the issue that's come up. So just have a plan ahead of time so that you're not utilizing your resources inefficiently. Really critical, post-runoff. So what is the plan for the punch list? So what happens in a runoff is you create a series, you got that easel and you're writing on it every station, right? So you create a punch list. So these are all of the items that need to get corrected before the equipment gets shipped. Everyone signs off on it. We agree on it. This is what we're going to do. I want to encourage you to trust that the operator or the supplier is going to do the job of getting all of these punch list items corrected. But you, as a project manager, you got to verify it. You got to get back to the facility. You got to pull the list out and you got to go through it before the equipment is packaged up and sent to your facility. Really important that you trust but verify that the punch list has been completed. Shipping coordination. This is often overlooked. You got to have your logistics people connect with the supplier's logistics people, because your logistics people need to know how big are the crates, how many of them, what's their weight, everything associated with it, so that they can get the appropriate bill of lading created and the shipping company coordinated. So all of that, again, that's on you. You are the project manager. You are the leader. So you got to help coordinate that stuff. Installation planning. So when is it going to get installed in your facility? What are those dates? Nail those down and make sure that everyone knows their role leading up to that installation. You've got to, this is where I missed the mark when I was at Cummins, my first capital project. I had the equipment shipped, but I didn't prepare the area in our facility. So it sat on the dock for a couple of days while we prepared the area that the equipment was going to go. So you can imagine the people that were driving the fork trucks in the dock, they were not too happy with me at all. But we eventually got it cleared out, set the equipment in, and all was forgotten. But in order to ensure that you're using your resources efficiently, I encourage you to clear that area out and get prepared. I'm sure you will. You won't be a ding dong like me and not think about that ahead of time. So, but I learned that lesson and I never made that mistake again. So the site acceptance test, this is at your facility. So, what's that look like? When is that going to be? And then you want to make sure that you prepare to essentially duplicate what you've done in the supplier runoff. So you're at the facility, you have done that runoff, and you want to effectively duplicate the runoff that you performed at the facility. So the goal is to confirm that what you experienced at the supplier's facility is exactly the same experience that you have at your facility when you signed off, or better. Better is obviously ideal. Documentation, and this is the boring aspect of this capital project management, is you got to make sure the documentation is completed. So that could be the PMs, the spare parts list, the standard work, the maintenance, the safety, every aspect of this documentation. You want to make sure that you've got a plan for completing it. It may not be you that has to complete it, but maybe you got to have your quality engineer confirm the quality plan for the equipment. I mentioned standard work already, really important. Operator training. So how are you going to train the operators for these stations? So you need the standard work in order to work through and train the operators. So it's kind of the chicken and the egg thing there. So make sure you're working on that. Again, continuing with post-runoff, maintenance training. So are there new robots on this equipment? Are there vision system? Is there software that your maintenance people are not familiar with? You want to plan ahead of time for getting your maintenance people educated so that they aren't trying to figure it out on the fly when they need to produce products. So plan ahead of time, know what's new, and get them trained before the equipment even makes it to your facility. What are the PM schedules? I mentioned that. Spare parts. You got to get that stuff ordered and prepared. And then the PPAP support, who do you need from your customer from a PPAP support perspective, as well as for the supplier. So one of the things that happens is you run the equipment off at your facility, and then your customer, let's say Ford, is going to come in your facility for a PPAP. And you haven't run the equipment since that supplier runoff. It'll be critical that you've got someone from your supplier there to help you just in case there is a problem. It's money well spent, and I encourage every customer to make that investment to ensure that the equipment is running properly, or that any issues that come up during PPAP are corrected or addressed by someone from the supplier. We want to make that ownership transition. It's important that you, as a customer, own this equipment. It is on you. You bought it. It is yours. You've got to be prepared. You've got to run that equipment off. Or you got to own that equipment after the runoff. It is yours. Own it. And then something that often gets forgotten is you want to do a lessons learned event. That means that you get together with your supplier, you get together with your team, and you say, okay, what did we learn in this process that we can apply into the future to help us be even more effective? That is our job, period, in life, in our professional career. How can we get better? It is a level up, level up, level up. If you're not, you're just going to be average at everything you do. But if you take the time to learn these lessons, then you're going to be a peak performer in your business. You're going to separate yourself from your peers. You're going to differentiate yourself. And that's what I want for you. That's what we want for you, is we want to have you apply these different tools, these lessons that we've learned along the way, so that you can enhance your career, that you grow your career. So the way you do that is by going back, learning the lessons, and applying that into the future. Okay, here are the common mistakes. Failure to clearly plan the runoff. Can't tell you how many times that we just show up and there aren't any parts, or there aren't the parts we need, that there are no checklists. It's more, hey, how are things going? How's it work? Yeah, good. All right. Woo, ship it. That is not a strategy for success. So it's important that we've got a clear plan leading up to the runoff that's been well communicated. We're all on the same page. So failure to have good parts available, man. So many challenges associated with not having good parts available specifically for assembly equipment, or even for machining equipment. If the castings that you have are out of specification and they won't fit on the fixtures that you've created, that's a problem in itself. So failure to have good parts. You got to verify the parts you're receiving are good before you even get started in the process. So too few operators to run the line. Very common. You got 10 stations and they send 5 operators. Well, that's not going to give us a good point of reference as it relates to the cycle time and capability of the equipment, because each operator is going to have to be jumping from station to station. So we'll have no tools for teardown. So it's often, you overlook that, right? It's not something that you think about and you're like, oh crap, we got to tear these parts down. We got to introduce them back to the line because we don't have enough parts to fully run the equipment off. So we got no gauges to verify the equipment, right? So we want to, like I said, you want to verify that the equipment is producing to the appropriate quality specifications, and you need gauges available to do that. So you got to have those available. Failure to take the lead on a runoff strategy. So if you don't do it, your supplier is going to do it. And obviously, if you've chosen the right supplier, if you've used all these tools that we've given you throughout this process, then you are going to have a supplier that you can trust. But if you haven't, or if you don't know, your supplier is going to put the runoff strategy together, and that may or may not be in your best interest, but my bet is going to be it's what's going to be easiest for them, right? So who doesn't want to take the path of least resistance? Nobody that I know, right? So failure to hold your supplier accountable. Too often, I mentioned this in the very beginning, too often we develop a strong relationship with our suppliers. We, instead of holding them accountable, we kind of buddy, and we say, you know, that's okay, we'll let it go. And as a result, we end up with subpar equipment or equipment that could have been better, but we didn't press forward or force our hand to ensure that it was better. So accepting unqualified equipment for the wrong reasons, very common. That goes back to similar to not holding the supplier accountable. So when I say the wrong reasons, your management insists that you get the equipment shipped. Now, I know for your management, that doesn't seem like a wrong reason, but for your long-term success, that is a wrong reason. So shipping for the sake of shipping because you want to meet a timeline is a really bad plan. Even though it might satisfy your customer temporarily, they're going to be upset about something else in the next week anyway. So, but I know if it's Ford, GM, Tesla, any of them, you know, all says easy does hard, but oftentimes we ship equipment mainly because of dates, and that is the wrong reason, especially if it's not performing to the specifications. So I just want to encourage you to push back. And if you've been working and completing those executive summaries on a regular basis, your team, your management will have, you'll have their support because you've kept them in the loop and you've kept communicating. At least that's the whole idea. That's the strategy. So that's your best chance of success. Failure to summarize each day. So that is an opportunity. That's communication. Really important that everyone's on the same page before the next day begins. Failure to verify punch list items that are completed, right? So you tell your supplier, you create a punch list, and then the stuff doesn't get done. Well, that's frustrating. That's aggravating for everyone involved. We said we were going to do this. We said that in order for you to ship the equipment, these things had to be done. Trust but verify. Go there. Ensure that the work is done prior to it getting shipped. And then, you know, again, a common issue is we don't take time to learn the lessons from the experience that we just had. This is anything in life. I want to encourage you. When you have an experience, and whether it's great or whether it sucked, take the time to understand it, even if it's journaling about it, and you know, identifying, okay, here's what I got to do better the next time. Here's what can make it better the next time. Here's what can enhance the experience the next time. So that's it. That is running through the tape. That's all the aspects of during the runoff, post runoff. That's everything that we need to do as manufacturing engineers to ensure that the equipment is performing to the specifications that our supplier promised and that we communicated in the request for quote. Again, your role, your responsibility is to ensure that those two are congruent. Here are the expectations. Here's the equipment. Is it performing to what we had expected? And if it is, obviously sign off, sing kumbaya, everyone's excited. If it's not, hold suppliers accountable to getting it right. Okay, so here's what's coming up in the future. Oh, any questions? Were there any questions at all?
No questions, Russ. I would like to add something. I was thinking,
yeah, for sure.
You know, the majority of the equipment we install these days has a remote connection, so that someone like a controls engineer can, you know, log in and take a look if there's some kind of an issue, and it really helps the customer. It's a good idea at the time of install to test that, make sure that it's working, because it's a lot harder to make that connection happen after you know, everybody goes home. So just wanted to throw that out there too.
Excellent. Yeah, appreciate that. That's a great point. So good point. Anything else come to mind? All right, so here's what's coming up. So we're going to start having some special guests on with these webinars. Again, you know, our mission here is to help grow your career, and we want to start bringing in some people that are that can be helpful for all of us to learn from and understand and really hear their stories in some cases, and learn from those stories. So please visit facebook.com/CapEx Sales LLC. So we put updates out there on Facebook. If you are involved in Facebook, we also have a LinkedIn page. And of course, you can get all this information. We have a web page. We do a weekly blog as well. So one thing we want to know, we want to hear from you is what topics are relevant for you. What would you like to have us cover? If you could just let us know what that is, we will do the study, and we'll put the presentations together, and we'll have these conversations. So, as always, we are grateful for the opportunity to serve our customers. We don't exist without you. And I know I say it every single time, but we cannot thank you enough for allowing us the opportunity to serve you week in and week out. So here are the folks you need to contact at CapEx Sales. These are the road warriors. Mike Dorsey, he focuses on South Carolina. Chris Mullins, who you just heard there with the radio voice, Chris Mullins. He's in Eastern North Carolina and Eastern Virginia. And then we've got Hooper is up in Western North Carolina and some select accounts in the upstate of South Carolina. So until next time, appreciate each and every one of you. Any questions come up, do not hesitate. If you're watching this on YouTube, just simply ask a question in the comments below, and we'll be sure to answer that. My email address is russ@capexsales.com. Appreciate you. Have an amazing day. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.